Hey guys, you didn't invent fire. You woke up one day and it was already here, hissing in the trees after lightning eating a forest alive, spitting embers into the wind. And for most of human history, you couldn't make it. You could only steal it and pray it didn't go out. Now imagine this. The sun has dropped below the horizon. Your breath is the only thing you can see. The ground is cold, the sky is silent, and the only thing standing between you and the dark is a fist-sized ember wrapped in dry moss tucked into a pouch on your hip. Lose it, and you don't just lose your dinner. You lose the night, you lose tomorrow. Tonight we follow the first wild flames that terrified our ancestors, the stolen embers they carried like newborns, and the moment we thought we'd mastered fire only to find out it still owned us. So settle in, dim the lights, and remember, every flame you've ever met has a story. And sometimes they were close enough. This is where the uncanny valley begins, not in Silicon Labs or animation studios, but in the old grasslands under a cold moon, when your people saw someone who looked almost like them but not quite. A little too still, a little too strange, familiar enough to draw you in, different enough to make you step back. That hesitation, half curiosity, half warning, has echoed through every generation since. It's why a doll can unsettle you. It's why a digital face can feel wrong. And it's why tonight you're going to walk that road yourself. We'll start with the smallest spark that flicker in your mind when something's off. From there, well crossed through forests full of eyes, into camps lit by rival fires over mountains, where ghosts left their DNA in your blood. We'll visit islands of strangers, hear the cough of disease in a too-wide smile, watch the stillness of death, and step across the thinnest lines between us and not us. By the end, you'll understand why your brain still holds the blueprint of those old encounters, and why even now you can feel it. Saw you ready to meet the faces your ancestors never forgot? Then let's begin. You're sitting alone in a room you know well. Every surface, every sound, every scent is yours. The faint hum of the fridge, the clock's slow tick, the thin draft sneaking through the window frame. It's all part of your landscape. You're safe here. Or so you think. There's nothing big that changes first. Just the sense that something in the room has shifted. Not moved exactly, not yet, but wrong. Your eyes land on the corner shelf. That framed photo has it always been tilted like that. You lean forward. The smile in the picture is still there, but is it? The corners of the mouth are frozen in place, yet the eyes seem fractionally different than you remember. The shadow under the left cheek feels heavier, like someone moved the light by a breath. You tell yourself it's nothing, a trick of memory. The brain is terrible at keeping perfect copies of the past, but your body doesn't believe you. There's a prickle at the back of your neck. Your heartbeat is doing that strange thing, beating steady but somehow louder, as if trying to make itself heard over a noise you can consciously detect. It's the same sensation you get when someone is watching you from a half-open doorway, their face hidden, but you know they're there. Your eyes go back to the photo. It's just paper and ink locked behind glass. Harmless. You've looked at it 100 times without flinching. So why now? Why does your stomach feel like it's bracing for impact? This is the first flicker. That microscopic gap between I know what I'm seeing and I don't trust it. You don't need a name for it to feel its weight. It's older than language, older than your species' name for itself. Because here's the truth. Your thinking brain is too slow to catch. You were built to notice. Not just tigers in the grass or snakes coiled in the roots. Those threats are obvious once they move. No, your brain was honed for subtler prey, for shapes and faces that almost fit the template of safe, but not quite. In the wild, this was no parlor trick. A misjudged face could mean approaching a rival tribe unprepared, or mistaking a predator for a fellow hunter in the dim light. So your nervous system learned to flag even the smallest mismatch, the stride that's too smooth, the hand that doesn't rest like it should, the blink that happens half a beat too late. You felt it before on the subway when a stranger's smile stretched just a little too far, in a shop when the mannequin's glass eyes caught the light, and you thought for a heartbeat it would move, in a dream when a friend's voice came out wrong, pitched lower, slower like an imitation. Each time the flicker is there, and each time you tell yourself you're being silly, because to admit it means admitting something ancient and uncomfortable, that you might still be living in a world where not everything that looks human is. Let's test this. Close your eyes. Imagine walking down a narrow trail at dusk. The air is damp. The undergrowth shifts with the weight of unseen things, frogs, insects, maybe small mammals you'll never see. Up ahead, a figure stands just off the path. You can't make out their face, not yet, but your body has already made its decision. Your pace slows, your breathing evens out not from calm but to hear better. Your shoulders hunch by instinct as if shrinking might make you harder to see. It's the posture you realise. Something about the way they hold themselves is not quite right. Too still for someone waiting, too rooted for someone lost. And your gut, without proof, without permission, whispers danger. That's the flicker at work. It's not a conscious judgment. It's a flare sent up from your brainstem, bypassing thought entirely. It doesn't care about being polite or politically correct. It cares about keeping you alive. The trouble is, in the world you live in now, this instinct has nowhere clear to go. There are no rival species waiting in the next valley. No near-human strangers huddled by their own campfire on the ridge. But the wiring hasn't vanished. It still scans, still measures, still runs the old friend or foe code on every face you pass. And when it finds something that almost matches but not quite, you feel it. In your skin. In your blood. In that part of you that doesn't know the 21st century has arrived. We like to think we've outgrown this. That our discomfort with an odd smile or a too-still figure is just personal quirk. But think of how fast it comes. You don't pause to reason. You don't weigh options. It happens before you even know it's happening. It's like tasting bitterness in a leaf. You spit it out before your brain remembers the word poison. Like pulling your hand back from a stove you didn't realize was hot. The flicker is reflex honed in a world where hesitation could end a bloodline. So next time you feel it, try this. Don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. Follow it. Because in the stories, your ancestors could tell that flicker was often the first sign that something was watching you back. And sometimes it was close enough to look like a mirror. From here, the trail leads deeper, into the mechanics of that alarm in your brain, into the circuitry that reacts before thought. If the flicker is the spark, the next step is the fire, the ancient system that lights up when you see something almost human. You don't decide to feel unsettled. It decides for you. Long before your thoughts assemble a sentence, before you can list pros and cons, the oldest parts of your nervous system have already taken a vote. Somewhere deep under the folds and poetry of your cortex, a small vigilant parliament bangs the gavel. Pay attention. Think of your perception like a relay with no timeouts. Light hits your eyes, lands on the back wall of your skull in the visual cortex and becomes edges, colours, motion. A blink later, specialised neighbourhoods take over one of them. The fusiform face area is basically your brains. Is it a face switchboard? It's astonishingly fast. It knows a face when it's barely a face at all. 2 dots align a suggestion. It's so eager that it sees faces in toast and plug sockets. That eagerness keeps you alive better to mistake a pattern than miss a person. But the uncanny face is a test the fusiform wasn't built to enjoy. It feeds the next relay station a contradiction. Yes, that's a face. And at the same instant, something's off. The features check out, eyes, mouth, nose, but the microtiming doesn't. The skin moves like a taught lesson rather than a living surface. The blink lands just after the thought behind it should have arrived. The corners of the mouth lift without the soft accordion of wrinkles at the eyes. Your visual system can't label the mismatch, but it can feel it. Enter the amygdala, the almond-shaped fire alarm tucked in the temporal lobe. People call it the fear center, but that's a simplification. It's more like the urgency center. It doesn't care about truth, only about speed. If the amygdala thinks something might matter, snake shapes, angry eyebrows, sudden stillness, it flips your body from cruise to alert. Heart rate up, muscles micro-primed, attention narrowed like a beam. In a functional scan, you'd see it. The fusiform lights up, face recognized. The medial prefrontal cortex tries to read intent mind behind face, but the amygdala spikes because the pieces don't fit. Your brain dislikes puzzles it can't finish. Ambiguity is metabolically expensive. It steals calories and time. The amygdala votes to resolve it by pushing you toward action, step, backstall, stare longer, don't commit. That's why the uncanny isn't pure fear. It's friction. A tug of war between approach and avoid both lines yanking at once. Your chest tightens, but your eyes won't look away. Your feet want to go, but your mind whispers, wait. If plain terror is a red light, this is a flickering yellow caution without clarity. Your body translates the vote into chemistry. Adrenaline microdoses your bloodstream. Blood flow adjusts fingertips, cool hearing sharpens for high frequencies, twig snaps, breath whisper. Pupils widen to drink more light. You are not panicking, you are tuning. Ancient code boots up with perfect backward compatibility because your hardware hasn't changed as much as you think. Here's a day-to-day example. You step into a dim hotel lobby late at night. A bellhop mannequin stands near the door too glossy, too still. Your cortex says display, but your neck hair says no. Every instinct leans in sniffing for the one movement that would turn display into danger. You circle wide without deciding to. If it were a person, they'd see a polite arc of respect, but inside you're triangulating angle distance exit. Another, you scroll past a headshot, smooth skin, photogenic teeth, perfect symmetry. But the left ear doesn't match the right, and the catch light in the eyes mirrors a window that isn't there. Your fingertip hovers, then moves on. You don't report the account. You don't fact-check. The amygdala already closed the tab for you. Or a nurse approaches with an encouraging smile that never reaches the I stew practice too efficient. You feel grateful and uneasy at once. Your nervous system isn't accusing anyone of lying. It's running a checksum on the face behavior packet and finding a small corruption. You will say thank you and sleep anyway, but a crosswind has blown through your trust. Now walk backwards in time with that same equipment. Picture your ancestor at the tree line watching a figure kneel by a river, cupping water to lips the way you do. The light catches the face. Its close brow, heavier cheekbones, wider nose made for winter. The gesture is human, the outline is human. The tools on the belt are human enough. And yet your ancestor stalls on the threshold between greeting and hiding. The fusiform says face, the prefrontal says maybe friend, the amygdala says not yet. That not yet matters. Civilization is built on the brave yes, but species survive on the careful maybe. The uncanny valley is the nervous system's way of buying time, of asking for one more blink, one more breath, one more tell. In the wild, you can't afford to learn slowly. When an almost human turns out to be hungry, your first impression is your last lesson. You might argue that modern life punishes this instinct. It makes us awkward at parties, suspicious of kindness, jumpy in museums full of wax. But before you judge yourself, remember that a reflex doesn't emerge from nowhere. Evolution doesn't spend on features it doesn't use. Your ancestors paid for your caution with babies who lived long enough to become grandparents. Of course, instincts misfire. They are good at fast, not at fair. The uncanny alert can be a false positive, unfamiliar accent. Atypical expressions, neurological differences your brain hasn't learned to read. With practice, cortex can teach amygdala to stand down. That's part of being human too, letting slower, kinder systems override the ancient surge. But override only works because the surge fires first. There is nothing to soften if nothing hardens. Think about the face again. A smile you trust ripples through muscles in sequence. Eyes first, then cheeks, then mouth. A choreography born of real feeling. A counterfeit smile often gets the order wrong. Mouth lifts eyes. Lag. You might not name the desynchrony, but your body does. It leans back a centimetre. It chooses the chair by the aisle. This is not cynicism. It is calibration. Even sound has an uncanny register. Laughter without breath. Speech with perfect enunciation and no fatigue. Footsteps that land in identical intervals for too long. Our ears love rhythm, but life always wobbles. When the wobble is missing, we notice. Your brain equates flawless with fabricated, because in the natural world, perfection often means trap. Now step inside the wiring diagram a moment longer. The medial prefrontal cortex, the mind reader, wants a model of whoever you're looking at. What do they want? What will they do next? With a normal face, it can predict the microcrease before a frown, the dart of the eyes toward an exit, the set of the jaw before a decision. With an uncanny face, prediction fails. Your mind reaches for a person and finds a mask. That failure isn't just spooky, it's lonely. Your social brain extends a hand and grasps air. Loneliness is dangerous to a creature built for groups. That's why the uncanny isn't just you. It's where is the person in there. When you sense there's no mind on the other side of the face, you step away to protect your own. There's another layer to the alarm contamination detection. You are wired to read sickness as small deviations, skin too pale or too flushed to tremor, where there shouldn't be one breath that doesn't keep time with the chest. Sometimes the uncanny face trips this circuit. Waxy skin textures in CGI mimic fever. Mechanical blinking echoes neurological illness. Your body rings the bell not because it thinks robot, but because it thinks risk. In a world without antibiotics, error on the side of distance kept families alive. And then there is stillness, the stillness of the no longer living. Your brain expects faces to carry the micro-motions of life, pupils dance, lips moisten, breath subtly rocks the head. A face that looks alive but doesn't perform the ballet turns your stomach because it walks the line between person and remains. In funerals across centuries, people lower their voices without being told. The amygdala has jurisdiction there too. All this equipment, face detector, mind reader, alarm work together under firelight in caves under cold moons across open grass. It works now under fluorescence and touchscreens. When a deep-fake politician stares from your phone with eyes that are a fraction too glassy, your ancient hardware flags it before your modern ethics get a vote. When an Android greeter at a tech conference smiles with frame-perfect timing, your chest tightens even as you clap. You're not anti-progress. You're pro-survival. The practical lesson is not paranoia, it's literacy. When the flicker lands, ask yourself which circuit fired. Was it the face choreography, the disease detector, the stillness sensor? Naming the channel gives cortex a foothold. You calm faster when you know which smoke triggered the alarm. But don't bully the alarm into silence. It's the oldest ally you have. It's the ancestor's hand closing on your shoulder when you lean too far toward a stranger's fire. It's the breath you hold when a voice in the trees sounds like yours and not. It's the pause that makes room for choice. Because that's where we're going, to the places where this pause met its greatest test. To the forests and valleys where other humans, not metaphors, not myths, moved like you built, like you burned, like you. Close enough for the fusiform to say yes. Different enough for the amygdala to say, wait. And on a night much like this one, with a moon much like this, your people stepped out of the trees and saw them. If the alarm is the mechanism, then what waits beyond it is the encounter. The first time you and almost you stood within the same circle of light. That's where we go next. You step off the open plain and into green. Not the friendly green of parks and picnic photos, but the old layered green that swallows sound and gives it back as whispers. Leaves knit above you, striping the path with broken light. The earth is soft with rot, sweet and sour, and each footfall exhales a smell of damp bark and old rain. The air presses against your cheeks like wet cloth. Somewhere ahead, water talks in the throat of a stream. You slow down without deciding to. The forest asks for that. It punishes clumsy feet with slips and snaps. So you tune your body to its metronome heel mid-foot toe. Breathe through your nose. Let the shoulders hang. Keep the jaw loose so you hear better through bone. You could be wearing boots or nothing. Your nervous system doesn't care. It remembers how to move quiet. Listen a drip, a gnat's whine, the dry rattle of a beetle knocking its shell against a leaf's underside. Farther out, a larger sound branch wait, not wind. Something living shares this tunnel of green with you. You stop. The forest doesn't. Ants fold themselves under bark. A lizard becomes a vowel in the moss. A bird writes a thin line of sound, then scratches it out. You scan the edges first. Predators prefer margins, the place where open meets cover. Your eyes trace the seam where dark understory meets the brighter path, looking for contradictions. Leaves that move against the wind shadow that holds shape instead of melting a curve that refuses to be plant. They're a vertical. Too smooth to be a trunk, too narrow to be a boulder. You don't see it so much as remove everything it isn't. A figure. Off the path. Facing you. Your stomach clips a note, then holds it without release. Distance is hard in the woods. The figure could be 20 paces or 50. The dappled light lies carving holes into surfaces that aren't really there. You count trees between you and I-tone 2-3 and guess at the span of your own stride. Still the math feels slippery. The posture is wrong. People at ease bend somewhere, a slope in the shoulders, a hip pushed outward, head tilted to let the neck rest. This one stands like a thought drawn straight from forehead to heel. Too still for someone lost, too patient for someone scared. Your hands open, palms away from the body fingers slightly curled. It looks like you're ready to receive a gift. Really, you're releasing tension so nothing trembles. Tremble broadcasts. You slide a breath in slow until your ribs touch your shirt. Hold. Let the edges of everything sharpen. Your eyes climb the figure the way fire climbs dry grass. Legs solid, torso thick through the chest. Arms heavy, forearms knotted like rope. Hands on near the waist, the other hanging. Neck short, head forward. And the face. You cannot read the face. not because it's hidden, because the light gives you pieces that don't agree. Brow throws shadow over eye, nose glassy with sweat, mouth neutral. Neutral is a choice. Neutral says, you move first. Time dilates here, then snaps. Your ears catch a second shape, a softer tread to your left. Your peripheral vision files a smudge, another figure parallel with the first. You feel tall grass against your shins that isn't there. The old body thinks encirclement and paints you into the memory with smells and weights that belong to other centuries. There are 3 choices and you know them, like you know your own name, advance, retreat, speak. Advance is a bet that curiosity won't be punished. Retreat is a confession you hope won't be chased. Speak is the coin you toss into a dark well and wait for an answer that proves depth. You choose the 4th option your ancestors learned by accident. You do nothing in a way that looks like something. You adjust a strap. You study a tree above and to the right of the figure as if you were looking there all along. Your body tells 2 stories at once. I'm busy, then I see you. A breeze rehearses itself through the canopy and the figure moves for the first time. Not a step, a weight shift. Subtle, precise, the kind of change you'd miss if you weren't waiting to catch it. The head angle's a fraction, a dog's not quite curiosity. The hand near the waist tightens around something that was always there. You didn't see it until the fingers told you. Stone wood. The outline is short, thick, textured. Tool. Of course there's a tool. The line between animal and person is long fire and a shorter handle. You think of your own gait, your own thickness through the chest. If you stood that way, your lower back would complain. This body was built to carry and push, to live inside winter. Your body was built to cross distances. You could run all day if you had to, not fast, but forever a loaded pendulum. You feel suddenly made of line, and the figure across from you is made of block. The uncanny doesn't shout here. It doesn't need to. It floats in the space between 2 silhouettes made by the same recipe with different hands. A forehead that slopes just enough to shelter eyes more deeply than yours. Cheekbones that sink just a touch, carving hollows where your face would hold light. A jaw that could break bone without tools if it had to. These differences would vanish in a city crowd shaved and clothed. Here where the forest prints every outline in honest ink they collect like a verdict. The left-hand tread stops. Silence widens. You realize the second figure has matched your distance, not closed it. That's information. Predators erase space. People measure it. You try a sound, the non-language kind that lives under words. The one that says, I know you know him here. It leaves your mouth as a hum low and even like you've just discovered a tune from childhood. The figure answers with a breath loud enough to be heard. Not a growl, not a call. A placement of breath in the air between you. Your skin prickles with the recognition of something you have never seen and always known conversation before vocabularies. The stream to your right insists on its own story. Water over stone, a geometry the ear can doze in if it wants. The sound gives everyone an alibi. If something goes wrong here, the trees can say they were listening to the river. You ground your eyes not on the face but the wrists. Wrists tell the truth, where tension pools, where decisions begin. The right wrist flexes a hair, releasing, not gripping. The left hangs heavy, not poised. That's generosity. You shift your weight the way people do when they're about to step forward and do not step. You let the suggestion hang an offer with no demand attached. The head ticks again, smaller this time, as if acknowledging you without rewarding you. The amygdala inside you cools a degree. It has learned to do calculus, less likely attack, more likely appraisal. You could talk. You could throw a word and hope it doesn't turn sharp in the air. But the space between your tongues might be wider than the trees. Words are expensive if no one can cash them, so you choose theatre. Slow, visible movement. You lower your hand to your waist and show your palm empty, then touch the strap of your pack knot to reach into it only to say, this is where my things live. The figure watches. The second figure watches the first. Dynamics click into place, one decides, one follows. You catalogue that for later like a taxonomist pinning a wing. Then a small event, a bird lifts from a low branch to your left, startled by nothing. In the beat your eyes move, the first figure takes a half step back. Not away. Just enough to rewrite the diagram. The second figure mirrors the angle, triangulation undone. You exhale longer than decorum and it feels like you've returned a borrowed time. What happens next might be trade or indifference or a shared path for 100 heartbeats, until a fork unthreads you apart. It might be nothing except a drawing you'll make later, In Ash, a broad-shouldered shape with eyes you couldn't quite bring into focus no matter how carefully you tried. Memory loves the edges more than the centres of faces. It will remember the tool before it remembers the mouth. But before this meeting dissolves into the stream and leaf murmur, you get one more gift. It's not a move or a word. It's a smell. A sudden fold in the air that isn't yours hides smoke, salt-laced skin, a bakery note of cooked fat, a wintering of the body you don't carry. Your brain tags it kin-adjacent. The uncanny sharpens, then softens like a blade dipped in water. You have no name for them. You don't need one. Names are handles, and you're not lifting this moment, only holding it. A twig gives under your heel loud, childish final. The first figure's head cocks, then steadies. A decision passes across their shoulders like wind reshaping grass. They lift a hand, not high palm turned a gesture that could mean enough or go, or we agree that we are done. Then they turn not a pivot, a deliberate redraw of the map and move deeper into the green. The second figure follows, not a glance back. Why would there be? The forest is their mirror. It tells them if you move. You stand until the sound of them dissolves into vegetation and water. Only then do you let the relief happen all at once. Knees loose, jaw looser. The world becomes noisy again, as if everything had been holding its breath with you. Later, when you try to tell it, you will edit yourself into a smaller role. You'll say you saw someone. You won't say that for a handful of heartbeats your species was a question, not an answer. You'll say the forest was dense, the path narrow. You won't say that the air learned your name and said it back in another accent. On the edge of the trees, the plain looks almost rude with its wide honesty. You step into it and feel your silhouette lengthen in the open light. Far behind, under the leaves, a hand rearranges a tool on a belt. A head turns toward a different kind of food. The conversation continues in a grammar of glances and weight shifts, and breaths placed like stones. You carry the meeting out of the shade like a coal wrapped in leaf. You don't blow on it, you just keep it from going out. Tonight it will warm your ribs while sleep edits your fear into a story you can keep. And when the story grows, legs, and begins to travel past from mouth to mouth until it gathers taste and smoke and a little superstition, it will need a word for the ones in the trees. You don't have one yet. You will. Because next time you won't see them in the undergrowth. You'll see them in the snow-heavier-boned, winter-shaped firelit across a valley. The forest was full of eyes. The mountains are full of neighbours. The wind here is not the playful wind of grasslands. It is a blade-thin, clean and honed on ice. It slices across the ridge in long invisible sweeps, combing the fur at your shoulders, stinging the skin beneath. Each breath you pull in feels like drinking from a cup carved out of snow. And yet these mountains have tenants who breathe as if they were born of it. You see them first not as faces but as shapes against the pale. Broad silhouettes moving in a low-angled light, each step pressing a deep stamp into the crusted snow. From this distance they could be any hunters, but the gait is different. Shorter stride, heavier hips, the whole body moving as a single weighted piece. Where your people's steps are a string of quick balanced notes, theirs are drum beats. They emerge from a fold in the slope, 6, maybe 7 of them, dragging behind them the body of a deer so large you think for a moment it must be 2. The carcass sags between them on a pole as thick as your wrist, the blood already freezing into a crust that darkens the fur. They talk if it is talk in sounds that carry more in vibration than in tone. Hums, clicks, low grunts that ride the wind like stones skipping ice. At first you think they wear many layers of hides. Then you see it much of that bulk is their own. Chests like barrels, shoulders that slope outward into arms thick as young trunks. Their legs are short relative to the torso, but each one is a column of muscle, the kind of architecture built to lift hold and wrestle. The stubborn weight of prey in deep snow. The face of the nearest one comes into focus. Your fusiform face area says human before anything else, but every subsystem in your brain adds a small asterisk. The brow ridge is a stone bridge casting shadow over eyes the colour of thawed ice. The nose is broad at the base, flaring to warm the cold before it reaches the lungs. The cheeks are wide and flat, the mouth a firm line that looks less like disapproval and more like a habit of endurance. One turns their head toward you. The motion is unhurried, a slow, even pivot that suggests both awareness and the absence of threat. Your heart does something contradictory, lifts the way it does when you see a cousin you haven't met in years, and drops the way it does when you realise the cousin carries a weapon you've never seen. They pause where the slope flattens, shifting the deer's weight so 2 can adjust their grip. You notice the tools strapped to their belts, stone blades with edges worn like old teeth, wooden shafts darkened by years of oil from hands. Nothing here is crude. It is worn but cared for as familiar to them as your own walking stick is to you. The uncanny is quieter in this moment. Perhaps because nothing here is pretending, it's all true to itself. They are not like you, but they are not trying to be. One of them squats beside the deer and draws a blade. The movement is precise, a slice through the hide, a practice peel to test where the meat has frozen. Another kneels opposite, catching the fold of skin, their hands working in a rhythm you've only seen in those who have worked together for years. It is the rhythm of a song you don't know but can still hum along to. You take a step forward into the snow's soft squeal. 7 heads lift in the same heartbeat, not startled, synchronized. Their eyes find you without the fumbling of a group caught unprepared. The one in front, the tallest, maybe the leader, stands. Distance compresses in moments like this. You are close enough to see the frost caught in their hair, the chapped lines at the corners of their mouth, the steam of their breath as it leaves the nose and mouth together. You are close enough to know that if they decided you should not be here, you would have only the slope in your legs for protection, and you suspect their legs, short as they are, could catch you before yours could save you. You try to imagine what they see when they look at you. Your frame is taller, narrower, your skin darker from the sun of lower lands. You carry tools they have not made, perhaps have not seen, though the concept is familiar. Your face is smooth where theirs is lined, but your eyes squint against the same cold. You realize with a small jolt that you might look as uncanny to them as they do to you. The leader raises a hand palm facing you. It is not a greeting you know, but it's not hostile. A pause marker. You stop. They speak Home's syllable rounded, carrying in the chest. Another answers with something shorter. It could be language, or just the efficient transfer of intent. Either way, you are the subject. The leader's eyes sweep the slope behind you, the horizon beyond, as if to confirm you are alone. Then slowly they plant the blade tip down in the snow and step forward. Up close, the differences gather weight. The forearms are furred with hair that catches the light in silver threads. The hands are broad enough that your own would vanish inside them. The nails are dark and thick, the knuckles capped in skin like old leather. And the eye shear is where the uncanny lands its mark. They hold a glint you recognize entirely calculation. This is not animal instinct. This is choice. You hear movement behind the leader. 2 more step up, one carrying a length of sinew, the other a pouch of something that smells faintly of resin. You notice the deer's body is still mostly whole. This is not butchering for eating here. It is preparation for carrying home. The leader stops a pace away and tilts their head, not the curious tilt of a child, but the angled measure of a craftsman inspecting a tool. You fight the urge to mirror it. From this close you see the small scars, a slice along the cheekbone, a notch at the brow, a thin pale line across the bridge of the nose. These are not ornamental, they are history etched into flesh. If you asked, they could probably point to each and tell you the hunt, the season, the outcome. You know better than to ask. They shift the blade to the other hand and extend the right knot toward you, but slightly to the side, palm up. An offering space. You reach slowly to your belt and pull free a strip of dried meat. It feels almost absurd to give meat to those who have more than you, but this is not about hunger. It's about the choreography of approach. The leader takes it without looking away from you, sniffs it once, then passes it back to one of the others. No thanks, no smile. Instead, they step aside, creating a gap in the line between them and the deer. A corridor just wide enough for you to pass. You understand the message you may go, or you may come closer. But this is as far as we close the distance. You step forward once slow until you stand at the edge of their semicircle. The deer's flank is near enough to touch. The smell of it is thick and metallic in the cold. One of the younger-looking ones glances at you, then at the leader, then back to the work of binding the carcass for travel. You could linger here. You could ask in whatever language hands and eyes can make about their hunts, their homes, their fires. But the uncanny, though dulled by the discipline of the moment, hums in your chest. It is not fear. It is the reminder that this is a meeting of equals, and equality in the wild is a rare and temporary balance. So you step back. The leader nods once, the kind of nod that seals an unspoken agreement. The others lift the deer again, adjust their grips, and begin the slow, steady march, uphill, disappearing into the fold of the slope from which they came. You watch until the last broad back fades into white, the footprints filling softly as the wind begins its quiet work. Only then do you turn away your mind, rehearsing the details so you can tell it later. The weight of their chests, the breadth of their palms, the silence between their words. But there is one thing you will not tell, not because you forget, but because it resists language the way your heart recognized them before your mind had the chance. Next, you will see what happens when the space between your fires shrinks, when the meeting becomes more than a passing on the snow. The valley between your kind and theirs is about to narrow into a single circle of light. Night in these mountains doesn't fall, it seeps. Shadows bleed down from the peaks, pooling in the gullies, swallowing the blue-white glare of the snow, until all that's left is a muted silver under the moon. The wind drops to a whisper, as if even it respects the stillness of deep cold. You can hear your own joints when you move. Your group has made camp in the lee of a boulder, its windward face crusted with ice like the rind of an old loaf. The fire is small wood is scarce up here, but it is alive, and in the mountains there's a kind of wealth. You sit close enough to feel the heat sink into your shins while your back stays pressed to the cold. The air smells of singed hair resin and the slow roast of something that was running on 4 legs this morning. When the meat is turned and your companions lean into their own quiet, you look out across the valley. On the opposite slope, a pinprick of orange answers you. At first you think it's a reflection, a trick of your fire on some exposed rock. But then it shifts, swells, breathes in time with the way flames do when fed. You know that rhythm. It's the same heartbeat your own fire has, but seen from a great distance. Someone else is out there. Not just out there up there in the cold your group was wise enough to avoid tonight. You narrow your eyes against the dark, but the moonlight flattens, the snow erases depth. The fire's glow is too far to reveal bodies. Still you can imagine them, shapes huddled close, passing meat from hand to hand, steam rising from their breath. The Neanderthals you saw today, or another band entirely, it doesn't matter. The effect is the same. That light is a statement. We are here. You think about the path between Uridge Ravine ice-crusted slope. It would take an hour to cross in daylight, maybe 2 in this light. Too easy to lose your footing, too easy to be seen as something moving where nothing should. Your own people shift at the mention of it the way people do when they recognize an idea they won't follow. It's not fear, it's weight. Every decision up here has to pay for itself in calories and blood. So you settle back, but you can't unsee it. That other fire is an ember in your mind now, throwing its own shadows. It's a reminder that you're not alone, not even in this frozen cathedral of stone. Your hands are busy turning meat, rolling a twist of hide into a tighter cord, but your eyes keep pulling toward that slope. Sometimes you think you see movement around the flame, a figure passing in front, casting a tall shadow. A spark rising high and vanishing into the cold. A brief flare as someone adds fuel. These are tiny details, but they keep you tethered to that distance like a fishing line. In another life, one with more warmth, more food, fewer reasons to guard what's yours you might cross. You might sit beside their fire trade, something tools for furs, dried berries for a new knot, a story for the sound of a laugh you've never heard before. But in this life, the mountain's arithmetic is stricter. Every journey has to come home with more than it's spent. The night stretches. Your own fire drops to coals, the orange and red shrinking to a bed of slow-glowing teeth. Across the valley, the other flame flutters low, then rallies. Whoever tends it moves the way your people do, willing to let the cold claim it even for a moment. The parallel is almost too much to look at. You glance away, pretending to listen to the pop of sap in your own firewood. Your companions drift into sleep one by one, curling into the shallow pits they've scraped in the snowbacks to the rock for shelter. You stay awake longer, your body still, your eyes working. A shape breaks from the glow across the valley, climbs a little way into the dark and vanishes. A scout, a hunter. Or just someone stepping away to breathe in air that isn't thick with smoke. The distance doesn't let you know. It just keeps the questions warm. The cold begins to assert itself again, creeping up through the soles of your feet, fingering the seams of your clothes. You pull closer to your fire's last heat, watching the other flame, in the same way a child watches a candle before sleep. There's no danger in it, not now. But there's no comfort either. Only the awareness of 2 circles of light, each with its own rules, each with its own perimeter where warmth ends and teeth begin. You think of the forest encounter, the standstill in the green. This is different. There the choice to approach or avoid was immediate, sharp-edged. Here it stretched over hours, pulled thin by space and cold. You can't read their eyes, their hands, their tools. You can only read the language of fire-fed, guarded, endured. At some point, without meaning to, you start matching your breaths to the imagined pace of theirs. It's a trick of the mind synchronizing with someone you can't touch, as if closing the gap by rhythm alone. The thought unsettles you. What would your ancestors have made of this a sign to bridge the valley or a signal to keep the valley intact? The coals at your feet hiss as a meltwater drip finds them. You startle as if waking though you weren't asleep. Across the valley the other fire blinks behind a swirl of windblown snow, then reappears, and you realise this is the real conversation, not word to word, but flame to flame. A flicker here, an answering flicker there. Proof of life, proof of watchfulness, proof of the thin line that keeps the dark at bay. Before dawn the other fire winks out. No ceremony, no rise of smoke, just absence. You stand in the half-light, stamping warmth into your feet, and scan the slope where it lived. There's nothing now but drifted snow and the memory of orange. Your own fire is a heap of ash crusted with frost, but the smell of it clings to your skin, your hair, your clothes. You imagine theirs will smell the same. You shoulder your pack, check the bindings on your spear, and glance once more at the empty slope. Somewhere up there people are moving through the dawn just as you are, with their own meat to carry, their own coal to manage, their own maps in their heads. And tonight maybe they'll light another fire. Maybe you will too. And maybe the valley will glow again in two places instead of one. Next comes the moment when the line between camps disappears entirely, not across a valley, but within the same ring of light, when food and fear and something older than either brings you close enough to smell each other's breath. It begins not with a grand decision, but with the smallest betrayal of distance. A pause too long at the edge of the firelight. A glance that doesn't stop where it should. A question asked with the hands answered with a shift of the body. You've seen animals do it, foxes circling wolves, testing the line between stranger and pack. But when it's people, almost people, the stakes are different. The danger is not just tooth and claw. It is the knot that can form between two bodies, despite every alarm bell evolution ever wired. You remember the first time you smelled them up close. It wasn't the sharp alien tang you'd expected. It was smoke, leather, sweat variations on your own scent. Different seasonings on the same meal. That sameness made the differences louder. A warmth in the breath from lungs built for colder air. A musk that clung to the hair at the back of the neck, the faint iron of blood not your own. You told yourself you were noticing these things out of caution, but your noticing lingered after the caution passed. The meeting that mattered was not in a clearing or on a trail. It was here inside a single circle of firelight. Both groups had stopped for the night at the same shelter, a hollow, carved by wind, its roof crusted in snow that let through a dim, even light. The wind outside prowled in gusts, shaking loose crystals that chimed softly as they fell. Inside, the air was warmer, the flames throwing gold into the stone. There were no speeches, no handshakes. Just the practical choreography of survival, placing packs against walls, tending the fire, arranging tools within reach. You kept to your side, they to theirs. But the circle was small, and fire has a way of ignoring boundaries. At first you avoided looking directly. Your eyes skimmed over them the way you glance past your own reflection when you're not ready to study it. But movement pulls the gaze, and they moved differently. Deliberate in ways you weren't economical, in gestures you made loosely. Even their stillness was active, a readiness that seemed carved into the spine. When food was passed, your dried meat, their roasted marrow, you saw the hands up close. Broad, yes, but deft. Fingers that could strip sinew or cradle an ember without flinching. When one of them handed you a piece, your fingers brushed theirs. It was like touching a tool made for the same task, but forged in a different workshop, weight and shape, familiar texture, strange. Later, when most of the group had curled into their furs, you still sat by the fire, idly turning a shard of flint between your palms. Across from you, one of them did the same. You caught each other watching, then not watching, the way people do when neither is ready to admit they are curious. The conversation, if you can call it that, had no words. A tilt of the head toward the flint, a mirrored tilt back, the slow extension of a hand, the passing of the shard knuckles grazing, the return of a different stone, its edge sharper, its balance finer. A trade, though not of goods. Your instincts kept whispering the same refrain. Not yours, not your kind. It listed the risks like an elder reciting laudacies you can't fight offspring that may not thrive, alliances that dissolve into blood. These were not abstract fears. You'd heard the stories of hybrids born weak of tensions that flared after the novelty faded. Evolution is a book of trial and error, and some errors are paid for in generations. And yet instinct is not a wall, it's a fence. A fence can be climbed. All it takes is one moment when the pull outweighs the push. That moment came in a way you didn't expect. The fire was low, the others sleeping. A log collapsed into itself with a sigh, sending up a swirl of sparks. In that dimming light you caught their eyes clearer now without the shadow of the brow catching the gold of the embers. They held your gaze without the challenge you'd feared. Instead, there was something older recognition. Not I know you, but I could. You shifted slightly, closing the space between your firesides. They did not move away. The smell of them was stronger now, warmth earth, a hint of fat from the marrow they'd eaten. Your knees almost touched. What happened next was not the dramatic undoing of centuries of caution. It was a small exchange of warmth in a world that had too little. A shared skin over the knees, a hand resting briefly on a forearm as you passed the last embers of a coal for their pouch. Contact measured, deliberate, but not denied. No one woke. No one spoke. But in the morning when you left, there was a new line in the map of your Minder path, not of territory, but of possibility. Weeks later you saw the result. Not in your own camp, but in theirs. A child whose features sat on the seam between two patterns, the height tending toward yours, the chest broad like theirs, the eyes a shape that pulled from both. The murmurs around the fire were hushed, wary. You felt the weight of every ancestor leaning over your shoulder, asking what this would mean. Some unions would fail, some children would not live past their first winter, but some like this one would carry forward, weaving fragments of one into the fabric of the other. Most of those threads would vanish over time, untraceable to anyone but the genome. Yet a few would endure, passed quietly from parent to child until they reached you. You carry those threads now, whether you want to or not. They run under the skin, in the set of your jaw, in the way your lungs grip the cold. You are proof that the fence was climbed, that instinct bowed to something else. Desire, curiosity, the simple arithmetic of needing warmth when the world offered so little. It is tempting to romanticize it, to paint the moment as love or destiny. But perhaps it was neither. Perhaps it was just survival in a form your nervous system could accept for a night. Survival doesn't care if the story is pretty. It only cares that it is told again in the shape of a living body. And yet in quiet moments you wonder if that glance across the fire was more than math. If maybe for one night, two kinds of human looked at each other and saw not the warning, not the difference, but the echo of themselves. Next you will meet a different kind of cousin one you cannot picture clearly, whose face has been almost entirely lost to time, yet who left a deeper mark in you than you realize. The invisible relatives whose only proof of existence is written in your blood. The first time you meet them, they're already gone. Not gone in the way the Neanderthals are gone, names carved into bones tools lying where they fell, but gone as if they'd been erased with a sleeve across the chalkboard of history. No portraits, no myths, not even a clear story to pass around the fire. Just a trace, a whisper in the blood. Your people have no word for DNA, but if they did, that's where the Denisovans would live, in the hidden language written inside your bones. And yet you wouldn't have known they were there at all if not for the day a stranger's hand reached down into the dust of a Siberian cave and lifted out a single weathered bone. It was a pinky finger, not even the whole thing. A fragment of a child's hand, small enough to fit in your palm, smooth, with age its story pressed into the mineral heart of the mountain. It looked like nothing. But hidden in its marrow was an unbroken thread coiled tight and waiting. Thousands of years after that child closed their fist for the last time, people in a different age, people with wires and glass and light that sees smaller than sight, would read the thread. They would find the code was not yours, not Neanderthal, not anything they'd seen before, a cousin with no face, a neighbour you didn't know you'd had. They named them after the cave Denisovans, a name made from stone, not from the mouths of those who might have spoken it. And this is where the uncanny shifts shape. Because when you picture a Neanderthal, you have something to hold on to, the slope of the brow, the barrel chest, the steady, deliberate gait. With Denisovans, there's only the absence, a human-shaped hole in the map. No artist can sketch them with authority. No storyteller can describe their voice. Even their tools hide from us. A few teeth-thick enamel, wide root-shint jaws built for a different diet, maybe a different climate. But the rest, you could pass them in the street of your dreams and never know. And yet they are inside you. If your bloodlines run through the heights of Tibet, the green of Papua New Guinea, the islands of Oceania, you carry more of them than you do of Neanderthals, 3, 4, sometimes 5% of your code written in their hand. That's not an accident. That's inheritance. The strange part is it's not just decorative DNA. It works. One Denisovan gene helps people breathe where the air is thin, pulling more oxygen from each breath. A gift from bodies that once made their home in the lung-burning altitudes of Central Asia. Another bolsters the immune system, a shield against diseases your own kind hadn't yet learned to survive. You didn't ask for these gifts. They were slipped into your genome in the same way a song slips into your head. You just wake up one day humming something you've never heard before. So how did it happen? The same way it always does when borders are thin and nights are long. A meeting on a trail. A pause at the same water source. The weighing of differences against the shared need for shelter food company. And somewhere in the calculus the fence falls, hands meet, bloodlines entwine, not often enough to merge tribes, but often enough to plant seeds in the human garden that would grow for millennia. The Denisovans walked away from those meetings with your ancestors, leaving nothing behind for you to find, no carvings, no hearths blackened by smoke, no discarded tools in the dirt. They were mountain people, forest people, river people. Perhaps they kept to the shadows on purpose, or perhaps the earth swallowed their traces before anyone could name them. Your ancestors must have remembered them, even if only as a shape glimpsed through mist, a voice that didn't quite match the mouth it came from. But memories fade. The shape becomes a rumour, the voice a fragment, until all that's left is a cautionary tale told to children about the ones who watch from the high passes, who know the snow's moods, who can breathe where you choke. Today the only reliable witness is your body. It remembers in ways you don't, the way your chest expands in thin air, the way your blood holds oxygen, a beat longer than expected, the way your skin and lungs and immune system respond to threats, with moves learned from someone else entirely. Standing in that Siberian cave even long after they're gone, you feel it. The cold here is absolute, but the walls are alive with echoes. The floor is soft with centuries of ash, dung and soil. Your breath fogs and falls back into you. Somewhere in this darkness a child once laughed, once curled a fist around a stone and pressed it to their lips. You can't see their face, but you can feel the pull of a line that runs from that small hand through time, through strangers, through choices made in moments of hunger or desire until it ends, right here in your chest. And this is the true uncanny of the Denisovans. Not that you don't recognize them, but that they recognize you. Every heartbeat you take in high country is a conversation with a ghost you'll never meet. It's tempting to leave them in the realm of mystery, a blank page in the family album. But soon you'll see that mystery doesn't mean absence. The next gift they left behind wasn't altitude or immunity. It was something subtler, passed in a way that feels more like story than science. And to understand that we have to look at what these invisible cousins gave you without ever setting foot in your camp. Next, you will feel those gifts for yourself, the strange inheritance of abilities and adaptations that carried across tens of thousands of years from the shadows of the mountains straight into your blood. The first time you climb into thin air, you expect the world to narrow. You expect your chest to beg your pulse, to thunder your thoughts, to stumble over themselves in the low oxygen haze, and yet you keep walking. Your breath is hard, yes, but it works. The headache never comes. The panic never blooms. Your body behaves as if it has been here before. It has, just not in your lifetime. Somewhere in the double helix curled inside you is a page written by someone else's hand. It's not your species' script. It's Denisovan. A code tuned to high mountains where the air is thin and the nights scrape ice across the skin. You don't remember learning this language, but your cells read it fluently. Make more hemoglobin. Open the vessels wider. Pull every grain of oxygen from each lungful. Live where others fade. You didn't earn this. It was left for you. The scientists, those far future bone readers, can point to the exact mutation the way a storyteller points to a landmark in a map. But in the time before maps, before mutation was even a concept, this was just life. Two groups meet at the tree line. One knows the passes, the hidden valleys, the seasons when the snow loosens its grip. The other knows something else, how to make fire burn hotter, how to carry it across days of wind without losing a spark. They share more than food. A child is born with the lungs that remember the mountains and legs that carry the plains. The combination survives. Not all the gifts were so visible. Some you'll never notice unless they're gone. There are strands in you now that act like sentries at the city gates. Immune responses sharpened in the shadow of diseases your people had never met before. A virus here. A parasite their foes that might have broken your line before it began. Somewhere a Denisovan fought them first and lived. Somewhere they passed that quiet victory into the next generation's blood. And when your ancestors took it into theirs, the battle had already been won. Even today, your skin and blood carry faint echoes of those war's antibodies that stand ready for enemies, long extinct reflexes honed on illnesses you will never meet. It's easy to call these things advantages. it's harder to remember that every gift was purchased. Each trait you enjoy was once a matter of life or death for someone else. The high-altitude gene didn't appear in a laboratory, it appeared in the lungs of a child gasping on a ridge whose body found a way to breathe where breathing wasn't enough. The immune boost was forged in the fever of a woman who sweated through a night everyone thought she would lose. Survival is expensive. You live on its inheritance. What makes it uncanny is the intimacy without familiarity. You don't know their faces, their words, their fires. You couldn't pick them out of a crowd of 100 strangers. But you carry their solutions in your blood like heirlooms from relatives you've never met. It's as if you woke to find a coat in your closet perfectly fitted to your body, sewn from cloth you've never touched with a note pinned inside. This kept me warm. Now it's yours. There's gratitude in that, and a trace of unease. Because if such gifts can cross the line between kinds of human, what else can cross? And did everything they leave make you stronger? Or did some things simply slip in neutral, waiting for the right or wrong moment? High in the mountains, you pass a shepherd whose lungs work like yours. Neither of you thinks about Denisovans as you speak. You talk about weather and the health of animals, and whether the pass will be clear before the snow. But in every easy breath you share is the quiet presence of someone neither of you can name who once stood where you're standing now. It's the same in the lowlands when sickness sweeps through and spares you for reasons you can't explain. In the quiet after, while others bury their dead, you wonder not aloud whether the thing that saved you was even yours to begin with. These are the gifts from the ghost breath where others suffocate, strength where others falter, shields against enemies you never saw. You didn't choose them, you didn't pay for them, you can't return them. They are part of you as surely as your own memories, and like memory they carry a shadow the knowledge that you are not the sum of your own people's making. In this way, the Denisovans are more haunting than the Neanderthals. The latter you could meet, touch, measure against your own body. The former you can only feel in the flex of your lungs, the stubbornness of your immune system. They are the presence you sense in an empty room, the shape that fits perfectly into your shadow, though you walk alone. But not all the cousins were so large, so built for the mountain's edge. Some were small enough to vanish into the undergrowth quick and quiet as the wind between the trees. And they too left their mark not in your breath or blood, but in the stories whispered long after their bones were gone. Long before anyone carved a map, islands kept their own secrets. Some secrets were just fish runs or hidden coves. Others walked on two legs. On the island of Flores, in what you now call Indonesia, the people tell old stories about the ibu-gogo little ones who came in the night. They spoke in murmurs, stole food from gardens, sometimes took children. They could climb trees like monkeys, vanish into the forest before you could shout. Most thought it was just folklore until the bones came out of the ground. It was 2003 when modern hands dug into the cave at Liangbua and found a skull the size of a grapefruit. The face was human but small. The body reconstructed from bones stood barely over a metre tall. The feet were long, the limbs short, the proportions all wrong for a child. This was an adult. They called her LB1, and she was not alone. Homo floresiensis, the hobbit. Not a fairy tale after all. Your ancestors would not have called them by that name. But if they met, they would have seen the same strange proportions, the same bright, deep-set eyes under a heavy brow. They might have laughed at the size, then stopped when they saw the tools, small, yes, but sharp-shaped from stone with skill that didn't fit the frame. The hobbits hunted pygmy elephants, giant storks, and, when they had torats the size of cats, they made fire-carved points, shared food. They lived on this island for hundreds of thousands of years, adapting to a world with limited resources. Small bodies cost less to run. Small groups leave lighter footprints. But here's the thing about islands, they keep you in, but they can't keep everyone out. The sea is a barrier until someone finds a way across, and at some point humans, your kind, came ashore. What happened next is guesswork stitched from shards of bone and the echo of stories. Did the newcomers see them as people, as prey, as rivals for land and water? There's no evidence of war, but there's no evidence of peace either. All we know is that after tens of thousands of years, the hobbits vanish from the record not long after larger humans arrive. Yet in some ways they didn't vanish. In the villages of Flores, elders still speak of Ebu-Gogo. The name means grandmother who eats anything. They describe small hairy people with pot bellies and long arms who could mimic human speech but never quite get it right. Sometimes helpful, sometimes a nuisance always watching. Folklore has a long memory, especially on islands. Maybe these are just ghost stories to explain noises in the night. Or maybe they're the last cultural trace of meetings between your ancestors and the hobbits. There's no proof that Homo floresiensis left their DNA in you. If they did, it's buried too deep or too faint for the tools we have now to find it. But their absence in the genome doesn't erase the possibility of their presence in memory. Sometimes what survives isn't blood, it's a posture, a turn of phrase, a shadow in the trees at dusk. You imagine that first encounter, your people stepping out of the mangrove skin still smelling of salt to find a figure half their height, staring from the edge of the clearing. The air full of bird calls and insect whine, the smell of wet earth, the shared flicker of fire in the distance. A long moment of not knowing whether to step forward or back. The uncanny here is not size alone. It's the mirror flipped twice, too small to be you, too human to be anything else. Every movement says alive like you, but every proportion says built for another world. And unlike the Neanderthals or Denisovans, you could look down into their faces, see the whole person in a single glance. That closeness might have made it harder, not easier to decide what they were to you. Maybe there were exchanges, food for information, fish for fruit. Maybe there were thefts in the night, laughter over a shared joke shouting across a clearing. And maybe eventually there was just less forest, fewer animals to hunt, more mouths to feed. The archaeological record ends abruptly for them. The last layers of tools and bones are covered by centuries of silence. But in the mind's ear the stories keep talking. The little ones who could vanish into the green, whose eyes shone in torchlight, who could follow a trail without leaving one of their own. The little ones who might still be out there if the forest is deep enough and the night is kind. You know better. Extinction is not a magic trick. It's just the sum of too many bad days in a row. Still, there's a part of you that doesn't want to close the door entirely. Because if something so close to human could survive that long in secret, maybe they could again. In that way, the hobbits of Flores are like all the other cousins, half in the ground, half in your imagination. Too gone to meet, too vivid to forget. Their existence makes the human story feel less like a straight line, and more like a delta with channels branching and rejoining, some vanishing into sand, others running underground. And perhaps that's the point. Your family was never just one thing moving forward. It was always many scattered across the map, meeting and parting, leaving traces in blood, in stone, in memory. Next, you'll leave the islands and return to the mainland, not to meet another cousin, but to discover the way your kind remembered them in a different language entirely. Myth warning and the stories that keep the uncanny alive long after the people are gone. The fire is low tonight, more ember than flame, but the stories are still burning. You've heard them in other camps, from other mouths, details shifting like shadows on a wall, but the shape's always familiar. A stranger in the woods, eyes where no eyes should be. A voice that calls your name in the dark, though you never told it who you were. Every group has their version. Some say the strangers are spirits, others that they're the children of the first humans who wandered too far from the fire and forgot their way back. The names change, the settings change, but the patterns don't. When you hear enough of them, you start to wonder if they're just old reports. Field notes in the language of fear and wonder. A Neanderthal becomes the forest man who teaches you which berries are safe. A Denisovan becomes the mountain dweller who can breathe in the thin air where your chest burns. A hobbit becomes the little eater who slips into your storehouse and leaves only footprints the size of a child's. No one calls them by those names. But if you strip away the magic and the moral lessons, the skeleton of the story still looks suspiciously like a memory. And maybe that's what myth is. Memory with the edges blurred until it fits the ear. Picture this. A child is born into a group that has never seen a Denisovan. Their parents have, but the child's only exposure is at the edge of the campfire in the low voice of an elder. The elder doesn't talk about DNA or hybrid offspring. They talk about the people of the high passes who can walk all night without tiring, who make their homes where the snow never melts. The child will never see them, but they will tell the same story to their own children, changing a few words here and there, keeping the core intact. That's 1,000 years of eyewitness testimony without a single meeting. In this way, the uncanny doesn't just live in your blood, it lives in your bedtime stories. The tone changes depending on what your ancestors felt toward these others. If the meeting was friendly, the strangers become wise guides, protectors in the wild, gift bringers. If it was hostile, they become tricksters, thieves, monsters whose eyes glow in the dark. In between, they're the watchful neighbours, never quite friends, never quite foes, always just far enough away to be safe, just close enough to be seen. And here's the strange part. Even after the people are gone, the feelings remain. You can still feel that flicker of recognition when someone's posture, voice, or face lines up with the story you've been told, since before you had words, it's not rational, it's inherited. Archaeologists talk about oral tradition as if it's a fragile thing, but some stories are more durable than stone. They don't survive in perfect form, they shift, adapt, disguise themselves, but the core signal endures. Think about it when researchers finally studied the DNA of people in Oceania and found Denisovan ancestry. It was a scientific confirmation of something the local myths had been saying for generations. There were others here before us. They just didn't leave their names. Sometimes myths outlive the evidence. On islands where the bones of hobbits have long turned to dust, the stories still describe them stealing food, singing in strange tongues, vanishing into the bush. In the mountains where Denisovans once walked, there are still warnings not to travel alone at dusk because the high folk might follow you home. And in the deep forests of Europe and Asia, there are still figures in fairy tales, hairy, strong, quick to anger, that could be Neanderthals wearing the mask of ogres. This is the other half of evolution, cultural, not biological. Your body carries their genes, but your mind carries their ghosts. Sitting by the fire, listening to the crackle, you can almost imagine the first telling. The night after a close encounter, the adrenaline still in the blood, someone starts speaking. They describe the stranger's walk, the sound of their breathing, the way their eyes caught the light. Others lean in, pass it along. No one writes it down. It's too immediate for the better to give it to the next voice while the heat of the moment still lingers. From there the details drift. The forest becomes darker, the stranger taller, the meeting more dangerous or more magical, depending on who's telling it. But somewhere buried in the embroidery, the real thread runs on. This is why your species remembers things it never lived. Because sometimes a story is the only bridge between generations who will never meet in the flesh. And if the story is strange enough, important enough, it will outlast the bones, the tools, even the language it was first told in. The uncanny then isn't just about how something looks, it's about the way it echoes in your head when you meet it for the first time and realize you've heard about it all your life. Next, we step out of the campfire circle and into the night itself to follow the trail of a meeting that no one turned into a story, because it was too brief, too strange, and too close to the kind of danger that leaves no witnesses. The night is clear moonlight pouring across the ground like water you couldn't drink. Snow has its own kind of brightness, enough to see your own breath drift away. The air carries every sound for miles, but tonight there aren't any, just the faint creak of cold in the trees and the occasional crack of ice adjusting to its own weight. You're alone, not by choice but because the others went ahead when you stopped to fix the lashings on your pack. The firelight they carry is long gone over the ridge, replaced by the metallic glint of stars. The trail is easy enough to follow and you know you'll catch up by morning. That's when you hear it. A footstep. Not the clean snap of a twig under a deer, but the muted crunch of something heavier, slower, more deliberate. It's behind you, or beside you, or both if that's possible. You turn expecting empty snow. Instead, there's a shape. It's close enough for your eyes to choose detail over shape, a broad shoulder. A chest that rises and falls. The pale blur of breath against the dark. The head tilts slightly like it's measuring you just as you're measuring it. You've seen Neanderthals before, across a clearing through a screen of trees. This isn't quite the same. The build is heavier, the stance different. The hair is longer but matted with frost. You search for familiarity in the face, but the moonlight keeps it in half shadow as if it wants to be remembered only in pieces. Neither of you moves. The silence is thick enough to bend the air. Your breath feels too loud. The longer you stand there, the more you realize this isn't the start of a story. It's a point in the middle of one you weren't told. Whatever this is, it didn't begin with you, and it won't end here. Your mind races through the options: run too noisy, too risky. Call out no common words. Approach could be the last decision you make. So you do something in between. You shift your weight back the smallest retreat possible without turning away. They watch. Then they mirror you and step backwards, slow, deliberate. It's almost a conversation. Not friendly, not hostile, just the mutual understanding that this is close enough. The wind moves between you like a messenger without a message. You notice their eyes catching more light than seems possible. Not glowing, not animal, just reflecting the moon in a way that feels too precise. It makes you think of water deep and still, with something living far below the surface. They breathe out once, and it drifts toward you, mixing with your own cloud of breath before dissolving. You catch the scent, smoke, animal, fat, and something mineral like stone dust after flint has been struck. It's both alien and familiar enough to tighten your throat. You expect them to turn first. Instead, they step sideways, keeping their chest toward you, watching, as they move into the shadow of a slope. It's not until the snow swallows the last sound of their steps that you realize they've taken a route you didn't even see. A hidden path worn just enough for someone who knows it to walk without leaving a clear trail. When you finally move, you find your own feet heavier, your steps slower. Every crunch feels like an announcement. You keep glancing back, half expecting the shape to be there again in the same place as if the whole exchange never happened. By the time you reach the others, the fire is burning and the smell of cooking fat pulls you in. You open your mouth to tell them, but stop. The words feel wrong. Too small for what happened, too fragile for the silence it carried. Instead, you sit, eat, and listen to the ordinary sounds of camp, the crack of wood, the hiss of snow, melting off boots, the soft breathing of those already asleep. No one asks why you're late. You don't offer. In the years to come, you'll think about that night more than you want to. Not about what you saw, but about what you didn't. No story came of it, no lesson, no moral, no joke to share with children. Just a meeting that began and ended in silence, as if it had always been there. You suspect you're not the only one. Somewhere in some other camp there's another person sitting by another fire thinking about you in the same way, half memory, half question. Neither of you will ever tell it out loud. Next, you'll see why some encounters do become stories, because they end not in silence but in noise, in the kind of shared event that demands to be retold for generations. It starts the same way as the meeting in the snow, quiet enough to hear your own pulse in your ears. The air feels brittle, as if one wrong move will shatter it. Then something moves in the dark. At first, it's just a shift in the brush, a soft snap of wood underfoot. You slow your breath to listen, expecting it to fade, but it doesn't. It grows. One step, then two, then a rush, and then impact. The first sound is not a voice, but the crack of wood against bone. A warning strike. Not yours, not theirs, some third thing between defense and challenge. The next sound is the answering roar, a raw, wordless shape of sound that doesn't belong to the wind or the wolves. Shapes burst into the firelight. Your people, standing, grabbing whatever's close at hand, clubs, rocks a burning branch. The others, whoever they are, come in low, fast eyes fixed on the meat roasting over the flames. It's not war, but it's not peace either. It's hunger with a deadline. You don't remember the sequence clearly afterward. There's the blur of motion hands grabbing feet, slipping in the snow sparks, leaping into the dark. Someone shouts your name. Something grabs your shoulder from behind, spins you, and for a moment you're face to face with a stranger whose skin is streaked with ash, whose teeth catch the firelight. You freeze long enough to see the calculation in their eyes. You're not the prize here. The meat is. They push past you, seize the spit with both hands, and run. The chase lasts less than a minute. Your fastest hunter leaps a log, catches one of them by the arm, and both tumble into the snow. The meat rolls away into the dark, hissing as it lands in a drift. Someone laughs, a sharp, almost disbelieving sound, and then it's over. The strangers vanish between the trees, their footsteps fading into the night. No one follows. There's nothing left to fight for. The camp exhales all at once, the adrenaline turning to cold in your bones. The fire's smaller now, missing the log that became a weapon. The smell of meat lingers frustratingly out of reach. Everyone talks at once, voices tumbling over each other. Did you see their faces? Did you hear that sound? What were they carrying? Were they wearing clothes? The details shift with each telling. One person swears the strangers had scars on their arms like claw marks. Another says their eyes caught the light like a cat's. Someone insists they moved too quietly for their size. Already the event is leaving your hands and becoming something else. By morning the story has structure. It starts with the first sound in the brush. It builds through the rush and the firelight and the stolen meat. It ends with the strangers melting into the forest like smoke. Days later, in another camp, you hear someone else telling it, someone who wasn't there. The strangers have become taller in their version, stronger, more dangerous. The spit now held an entire deer. The chase was longer, the struggle bloodier. No one questions the changes. The point isn't accuracy, it's transmission. That's how a memory becomes a myth. Noise is easier to remember than silence. A shouted warning, a branch breaking a roar in the dark, these are anchors in the mind. You can hang details on them even if the details shift. And the more mouths the story passes through, the more it settles into a shape that can survive the years. Your people will tell this one for a long time. not because of what was lost, but because of what was seen. The strangers were real enough to touch close enough to smell fast enough to vanish before anyone could ask the only question that mattered. Who are you? You realise now that survival isn't the only thing you inherited from your ancestors. You also inherited the need to make noise about what you've seen, to turn the fleeting and frightening into something you can pass on, even if it changes along the way. Even if someday someone hears it and swears it never happened, next you'll learn that not all meetings are about food or fear. Some are about territory and the quiet invisible lines drawn across the land that no one dares to cross until they do. From a distance the ridge looks like any other. Snow at the crown pines leaning under the weight of it, a slope gentle enough for deer to climb. But your people skirt it every time, adding days to the journey. They don't explain. They don't have to. Some places carry a smell you can't wash off. You only learn the reason by accident. One morning while tracking elk prints, you follow them straight up the side without thinking. The air is still muffled by snow until you notice the first sign, a row of stones each the size of a man's head, set in a crooked line along the ridge. Too regular to be nature, too deliberate to ignore. At first you think it's an old hunting blind. Then you see the other marks, bones strung between trees, the ribs of something large, elk maybe, or something bigger, bleached to white and humming in the wind. The smell hits you, next wood, ash, damp, hide a tang of fat gone sour. None of these things are on your side of the ridge. The elk tracks cross the line without hesitation. Your own feet stop. It's not magic. It's memory, yours or someone else telling you that this line means not yours. That's when you see the other footprints. Not elk, not wolf. Broad, human-shaped, but shorter in stride than yours, deeper in the heel. They come right up to the row of stones and stop. On the other side, they're everywhere. You know the stories. Not about who lives there now, but about who used to. The rich people who watched from the tree line, who took nothing from you but never let you take from them. They've been gone for seasons, so you've been told. But footprints don't lie, and neither does the smell of a campfire on a windless day. For a moment you think about crossing. The tracks are fresh, the snow on them still crisp at the edges. The ridge would cut hours off your path, and there's no one in sight. But something in you resists. Not fear exactly, more like the bone-deep instinct that stepping over would change you in a way you couldn't undo. You kneel, touch the nearest stone in the borderline. It's cold, rough, dusted with ice. Your fingers stick for a moment before you pull them back. The sting stays in your skin. From the corner of your eye movement, a shape dark against the pale snow standing between the pines on the far slope. Too far for detail, close enough to know it's watching. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. The message is clear. You step back. The shape remains until the ridge hides it. When you rejoin your group, no one asks why you're late. You mention the elk, but not the stones, not the footprints, not the watcher. There's no point. The line is older than you, older than them, maybe older than the people who live on the other side now. It's not just a border, it's an agreement unwritten, but enforced. Later by the fire, you think about how many such lines there must have been in the world. Invisible countries carved not by maps, but by memory, each one marking where someone else begins. These borders shape the stories as much as the meetings themselves. The people beyond them become characters in the mind, dangerous, strange, enviable, wise, depending on what the teller needs the listener to feel. They may be close in blood, close enough to share the same storms, but the line keeps them other. And the longer it holds, the stranger the other side becomes. You realise that this too is part of the uncanny valley. It's not just faces that feel almost human as the land itself. The hills and rivers beyond the line look familiar but belong to a history that is not yours. And just like with the cousins you've met, the pull is their curiosity tangled with caution. Next you'll see what happens when one of those lines is crossed. Not by accident, but because survival demands it, and how quickly familiarity and strangeness can collapse into something entirely new. It begins with hunger. Not the kind you complain about after a short meal, but the kind that fogs your vision and steals your balance. For 3 days the traps have come up empty. The wind has carried away every track before you could follow it. The children's hands are cold even in the shelter of the fire. Your people are running out of quiet ways to ignore the truth. The ridge is closer now than the nearest herd. You can see its white crest from camp the dark pines like ribs along its sides. And in your mind you see the elk trail that cuts across Ite, a shortcut through the land you were taught not to enter. The stories say nothing good happens there, but the stories don't feed you. At dawn you decide. Not out loud. Some choices are too dangerous to announce. You take only a spear and a hide bag, telling the others you'll circle toward the marsh. Instead, you turn toward the ridge. The climb is slower than you expect. Snow gives way under your feet, the wind pushing you back with every step. The stones of the border appear out of the white like teeth in a half-buried jaw. For a moment, you just stand there breathing clouds into the air. The line looks smaller than it felt in your childhood stories. Small enough to step over, small enough to make you wonder why you've waited this long. Your boot touches down on the far side. The world does not change at first. The same wind, the same snow, the same aching hunger in your belly. But as you walk, the air takes on a different weight, the silence growing thicker, like the forest is holding its breath. You find tracks within minutes. Broad splayed hooves elk fresh. They lead deeper into the trees, the kind that lean close enough together to block out the sky. You follow the spear's tip brushing low branches, your breath loud in your own ears. Half an hour in, you see it a movement between the trees. Not elk. Something upright. You freeze, heart knocking in your chest. The figure moves with the kind of confidence that says, "This is my place." They're taller than you expected, heavier in the shoulders, with hair the colour of bark. You can't see their face, but you can feel their attention. They've known you were here since you stepped across the stones. They don't come closer. Instead, they tilt their head toward the elk tracks you've been following as if pointing the way. It's not a welcome, but it's not a warning either. A transaction, maybe. You move forward slowly, watching them from the corner of your eye. They stay still until you're several paces past, then vanish into the trees without sound. Your pulse doesn't slow until you see the elk itself, a bull standing in a clearing, breath steaming in the cold. The hunt is quick, more from luck than skill. By the time you dress the kill and sling the meat, your hands are stiff with cold and the light is turning grey. On the way back, you keep glancing over your shoulder. Not out of fear exactly, more out of the sense that the forest is no longer neutral ground. You're not sure if you've been allowed to take this or if you've just stolen it under the eyes of someone who decided not to stop you. When you cross back over the stones, the ridge looks different. Lower somehow. Less like a wall, more like a seam in a piece of cloth you've just torn. Back at camp, no one asks where the meat came from. They don't need to. The border is not a map line here. It's a part of the air, a part of the smell on your clothes. The elders eat in silence, and you know they know. That night, as you try to sleep, you picture the figure in the trees. Not their face, you never saw it, but the way they stood steady and still, letting you take what you needed. And you wonder, was this the first crossing? Or just the first one you remember? Next, you'll see what happens when these crossings aren't quiet, when two groups try to share the same space, and the uncanny turns into something too close, too fast for either side to ignore. The first sign is the sound of chopping. Not the rhythmic crack of ice breaking, but the dull, deliberate thud of wood splitting under a stone axe. It comes from the river bend, where your people set traps for fish. You follow it with a few others, thinking maybe one of your own got an early start, they're not yours. Two figures stand knee-deep in the shallows, prying loose a log to make a weir. Their movements are efficient, practiced, hands gripping wet wood, without slipping, bodies braced against the current. They glance up at you without alarm, as if you've been expected. It's too close for comfort. This bend is your bend. It's where you know the rocks under the water by touch, where the best fish come at dusk. To see someone else standing there, shaping it to their needs, feels like finding a stranger sitting at your fire. You don't speak, not because you can't, but because there's nothing to say that won't start something. They don't speak either. The only communication is in the way neither group steps back. Over the next days, you see them more often. At first, it's just the two at the river, then more, gathering reeds where you gather reeds, tracking the same herds, passing close enough on the trail to smell the smoke in each other's hair. It's not open conflict, but it's not avoidance either. You circle each other like predators testing the edges of a shared kill. There's a strange mirror in it. They move like you carry tools like yours, even laugh in the same burst when something goes right. But the details are wrong, different knots in their cordage, different shape to their spear points, a way of standing that keeps their weight lower, ready to spring. At night, the campfire talk changes. The elders remember older times when your people met others like them, but not them. Some meetings ended in trade meat for stone skin for shell. Others ended with one camp moving on because two couldn't draw from the same land without blood. No one says which this will be, but every hand stays closer to their weapon. It's a storm that builds quietly. A missing basket of smoked fish. A set of footprints around your drying rack. One of your hunters swears they saw a shape moving near the meat cache at dusk. By morning, a section of the cache is empty. No proof, just the sense that two worlds are overlapping more than they can. The breaking point comes at the river. You arrive to check the traps and find one of the strangers already there, pulling a fish from the net you set the night before. They look up at you with no shame, no apology, just the flat acknowledgement of someone who sees no reason why this shouldn't be theirs. Something in your chest snaps. The words you've been holding back spill out not words they'll understand, but tone sharp enough to carry meaning. They answer in kind. The sound carries down the riverbank, pulling more people from both sides. For a long moment the air is thick with the possibility of violence. You see the same flicker in their eyes that you feel in your own calculation anger, and something else. Recognition. It's the uncanny at its most dangerous, the point where the other is so much like you that you can't write them off as beast or shadow. They're human enough to want the same things you want to take them the same way you would, and that means they're competition. In the end, no blood is spilled yet. The strangers drop the fish back into the net, step away without turning their backs. You collect the net in silence, your hands trembling not from fear, but from the knowledge that this isn't finished. That night the campfire feels smaller. The stories are quieter, as if everyone's listening for footsteps beyond the glow. You know they're out there on their side of the dark, telling their own version of the same day. Next, you'll see what happens when the overlap isn't just in space or food, but in family, and how the boundaries between us and them can dissolve in ways that leave marks for generations. It begins quietly, as most dangerous things do. A hunting party returns not just with meat, but with a stranger wounded, limping eyes darting between faces. They say they found him tangled in a fallen tree, his leg caught beneath a branch. He couldn't free himself. They could have left him. They didn't. At first, it's just practical. A body in your shelter means another mouth to feed, but also another pair of hands once healed. You bind the leg, share the broth, watch him watch you. His language is different, but not distant. With enough gestures, you find common ground in meaning, if not in words. Days stretch into weeks. He learns where you keep the water skins, where to sit by the fire without blocking the draft, which children not to tease. You learn the scars on his hands are from net weaving, not fighting. He laughs rarely, but when he does, it's in short bursts that make the others glance over. By the time he can walk without the stick, no one calls him the stranger anymore. And then one morning he's gone. Not vanished, gone to the ridge to the other side, but he doesn't go alone. The girl who carried water to him in the first week, who taught him the words for hot, and again is missing too. They left together in the early light, footprints pressed side by side in the frost. The camp reacts in layers, confusion first, then anger, then the uneasy quiet of knowing exactly what happened and not wanting to say it out loud. No one chases them, not because they couldn't be found, but because bringing them back would change nothing. Seasons pass. The ridge remains, the border holds, but not perfectly. Sometimes during the foraging trips you spot figures at the edge of vision. A small child clinging to the leg of someone you half recognize. A basket left on your side of the stones filled with dried fish and wrapped in bark. No one speaks of taking it, but it's gone by nightfall. It's a strange kind of truce built not on agreements, but on the fact that now, somewhere out there are faces that belong to both sides. Children with the hair of one people and the eyes of another. Children who will grow up hearing two sets of stories about the same land. The elders pretend not to notice, but the younger ones watch the ridge differently now. It's no longer just a wall, it's a bridge too. A narrow, dangerous one, but real. You realize the uncanny has shifted again. What was once almost human has become almost family, and that's harder to guard against. You can defend food territory, even stories, but blood moves on its own. It carries pieces of both sides into places neither planned. Years from now, when people speak of the ridge, they'll still mention the old warnings, but they'll also talk about the child who could throw a spear like his father and weave nets like his mother. They'll talk about the time someone crossed for meat and came back with a life, and maybe they'll forget where the border was altogether. Next, you'll see how these bridges, whether made of blood or bargain, can collapse, and how quickly kinship can turn back into conflict when the wrong kind of hunger comes into play. For a while it works. The ridge is quieter. The shared baskets of food appear more often. Hunters from each side nod instead of looking away. It's not trust exactly, but it's a rhythm, a slow, cautious exchange that feels like it might hold. Then the winter stretches too long. The fish vanish from the river. The herds turn south earlier than expected. Every cache is opened sooner than planned, and every night the fire feels smaller. Hunger doesn't care about bloodlines, it burns through them as easily as dry grass. The breaking starts with a missing child. At first it's panic shouts into the snow torches lifted high, the entire camp combing the woods. The tracks lead toward the ridge light, and staggered as if the child was running. Then they disappear among heavier prints, adult, broad, unfamiliar. When you return empty-handed, the camp is already divided. Some say the other side took the child. Others argue it could have been wolves or fall into the river. But the doubt sticks like a thorn. It grows overnight. The next morning a party crosses the ridge, not with baskets or gifts, but with weapons. They come back before dusk, silent, their faces tight. No one says what they saw or didn't see. But that night there are no more baskets left at the border. Days later, the first real clash comes at the river. 2 hunters from your side, 2 from theirs, all reaching for the same trapped fish. There's no shouting this time, just the sound of ice breaking under boots and the thud of bodies in shallow water. When it's over, one man doesn't get up. The current carries him away before anyone can pull him to shore. The ice on the river seems to freeze thicker after that, as if it's sealing over something deeper than water. The uncanny now is sharper, Mina. When you see their faces, you no longer look for the shared blood. You look for the edge of the spear point they might be holding. The children who once ran to the ridge are told to keep away. The gifts stop entirely. Even the stories change. The other side becomes thieves again, tricksters, enemies. It's as if the bridge of bone never existed. One night you wake to the smell of smoke too, much too close. You run to the edge of camp and see the glow from the ridge. Not sunrise, not the moon. Flames moving in a line as if someone set fire to the trees themselves. By morning the border is ash. No more stones to mark it. No more pines leaning over the line. Only blackened stumps and a wind that carries the scent of both camps burned into it. The next winter will be harder. Without the ridge, the land feels exposed and a wall to hide, behind no seam to stitch the story together. You wonder if the children who carry both bloodlines will remember the days when it was different, or if they'll only know the part that came after the hunger, the taking the fire. You understand now that kinship isn't a shield. It's a thread, and threads can be cut. And when they are, the wound isn't clean. It frays, it tangles, it leaves loose ends that catch on everything. Next you'll see how your kind and theirs found another way to remember each other, not through blood or trade, but through marks in the earth and stone that outlasted the people themselves. The ridge is gone, but the land still remembers. Not in stories, those have shifted, grown sharp-edged, but in marks no season can erase. It happens during a hunt. You're following the tracks of a deer along a dry gully when you notice the wall. At first it's just a section of rock, jagged and sunlit. Then the lines appear shallow grooves, deliberate crossing in patterns too regular for chance. You brush away the dirt with your hand. There's colour under the dusted ochre, faded but still clinging to the stone. Shapes emerge, the curve of a horn, the sweep of a human arm, dots like falling snow. They're not your people's marks. The style is wrong. The horn's too long, the arm's too short, the dots in the wrong places for your stories. But the intention is the same. Someone stood here once, mixing earth with spit, grinding stone against stone, turning memory into something you could see. You call the others. They gather in the narrow light of the gully, running fingers over the grooves. The elders murmur, some in recognition, others in dismissal. But no one can deny this. Whoever made them wanted to be remembered. As you walk farther, you see more. Handprints, some large, some small, pressed into rock with the same red. Not painted, but placed as if to say, I was here. I touched this. One handprint is smaller than yours, the fingers splayed wide. It could belong to a child, but the span between each finger is longer than any child you know. The uncanny isn't in the shape, it's in the warmth you imagine was still in that hand when it met the wall. At night by the fire, you try to think of why they made these marks. To tell a story, to claim the place, to guide someone who would come later, or just to leave proof in case the people themselves vanished before their memory did. Your own people leave signs, stacked stones, carved notches on trees, smoke patterns, but they fade in seasons. This is different. This is stubborn. This says, you will not forget us even if you want to. In the days after you notice how these marks change the way people move. Hunters avoid stepping too close. Children stop shouting when they pass the gully. Even the wind seems to hesitate there, sliding along the rock instead of rushing through. It's a strange kind of truce, one that doesn't need guards or baskets of food. The mark itself holds the agreement we were here, and we may be here still. You think about the others, those across the ridge, those whose blood sometimes runs with yours, and wonder if they see your people's marks in their own lands. If they do, they recognize them. Do they stop? Do they feel the same pulse of both closeness and distance? Maybe the marks aren't for kin. Maybe they're for the ones who come long after, who will stand here, not knowing your name, but knowing you were real. The gully becomes a place you visit without reason. Sometimes you bring water and wipe the dust from the ochre. Sometimes you just stand there, hand over handprint, trying to feel the shape of someone you'll never meet. You realize the marks aren't about territory. They're about survival of a different kind. If your body is gone and your bloodline breaks, the mark is still here. It outlasts the quarrels, the hunger, the forgetting. Next, you'll see how not all marks are meant to be seen. Some are hidden in caves deep and dark, and what it means when you enter a place where the walls themselves seem to watch you. It begins with a hollow sound. You're moving along a cliff face when your spear tip knocks against the rock and the echo comes back wrong deeper, slower, as if the stone itself is breathing. You crouch, push aside the tangle of roots at the base and find the opening. It's narrow enough to scrape your shoulders, but the air pouring out is cool, heavy, untouched. When your eyes adjust, you see the tunnel slanting down into blackness. You should turn back. Instead, you tie a torch from dry grass and resin and step inside. The sound of the outside dies within the first few paces. Even your own breath feels muffled as though the walls are swallowing it. Your torch throws jittering light and the shadows cling to the rock like they don't want to leave. And then marks. Not scratched into the stone, but painted thick lines of black and red curling into shapes that seem to move if you stare too long. At first, you think they're animals. Then they change. From one angle, it's the head of a stag. From another, it's the curve of a human face. You walk deeper. The walls close in until the torch heat bounces back at your skin. More shapes appear, handprints layered over each other, so many that they become a kind of living texture. Some are small, some impossibly large. One set of fingers has 6 instead of 5. You put your own hand against it. It's cold, not the damp cold of the cave, but a sharpness that makes you pull back as if the stone itself recoiled from you. The uncanny here is different. Outside, the other people were almost you. Here the stone is almost alive. The shapes watch you the way eyes do still, but never really still. You remember stories told around the fire of caves, where spirits lived, where hunters went to speak with them before a dangerous season. Some said the spirits were the ancestors. Others said they were something else old awaiting. You notice the floor sloping down to a chamber where the air is heavier still. The walls there are covered completely, no bare rock, only patterns. Circles within circles, lines radiating outward like sun rays but wrong, somehow bending where no sun could bend. Your torch spits resin and the shadows jump. For a moment you think one of the shapes moves not like an illusion, but as if it leaned forward to see you better. Your chest tightens. You've hunted lions, crossed frozen rivers, stood on the ridge with a spear in hand, but this is different. This is the feeling of being inside someone else's memory without permission. You back away, careful not to turn your back until the tunnel narrows again. When the cold outside air finally hits your face, it's almost a shock. You tell no one exactly what you saw, just that the cave was empty, that the marks were old. But at night, lying by the fire, you feel the weight of the stone around you, as if the walls have learned your shape and kept it. Some marks are meant to be seen by everyone. Others choose who sees them. The cave stays in your mind long after you leave it. Not the shapes exactly, but the feeling, the quiet weight of being measured by something that does not speak. You carry it through the changing seasons, the slow thaw, the first green tips pushing through the frost. Herds return, fish run upriver again. The ridge grows a thin fuzz of saplings where the fire burned it bare. Life rebuilds itself without asking permission, without waiting for anyone to agree on how the past should be remembered. You notice how stories change in this new season. The strangers from the ridge become shadows in the retellings, sometimes friends, sometimes enemies, depending on the teller's mood. The child who vanished is spoken of in softer tones, as if the distance has polished away the edges of grief. Even the burning of the ridge becomes a story with beginnings and morals it never truly had. You catch yourself doing it too, shaping the details so the listener's face turns the way you want it to, leaving out the parts that don't fit the shape. One evening you walk alone to the gully where the ochre marks still cling to the stone. You lay your hand over a faded print and feel the roughness bite at your palm. The person who left this is gone, no name, no body, just this touch across time. And yet standing there you feel less alone than you do in the noise of camp. It comes to you then someday you will be the mark. Maybe not on stone, maybe not in ochre, but in the stories and the shaped memories that someone else will tell. They will change you as you have changed those who came before, turning you into something almost true. The thought is not frightening. It's grounding. If survival is the first work of living, then leaving a shape behind is the second. Not for glory, glory fades faster than paint, but so that somewhere someone will feel that same pulse of connection when they hear your name or see a mark they think might be yours. You begin to notice the quiet ways people already leave such marks without realizing it. The way an elder always sits with their back to the wind, creating a sheltered corner for the children. The song someone hums while mending a net even when no one else is listening. The path worn smooth between the river and the smokehouse. All of it small as breath, yet one day it will be all that's left. You walk back toward camp in the last light. Smoke from the fires threads up into the sky, curling into the dusk. The voices carry softened by distance. Somewhere among them, children are being told about the ridge, the river, the cave. Already the world you lived is turning into the world they'll imagine. You pause on a rise just before the camp comes into view. From here, the fires look like stars resting on the ground, each one with its own small universe around it. You wonder how many such universes you've passed without knowing. How many times you were the stranger just beyond someone else's firelight, almost seen, almost known, then gone. That's the final turn of the uncanny, when you stop chasing the almost human in others and realize you're becoming the almost human in someone else's mind. And there is a strange peace in that, a knowing that you will outlive yourself if only in fragments. That night, as the fire burns low, you look into the embers and see the shapes dancing their horns, hands, face, just as they did in the cave. You don't know if they're memories or inventions. It doesn't matter. You add your own image to them, knowing it will blend and blur with the rest. When the last coal dies, the dark takes it. And somewhere, the story begins again, only this time you're in it, waiting in the shadows, watching someone else cross the threshold you once did. The night has gone very still. Not the comfortable stillness of a camp that's fed and warm, but the kind where every sound seems to have been drawn away into the dark. You can hear your own heartbeat if you stop moving. And in the distance, the ridge-black, now shapeless, rests like the spine of something enormous sleeping under the snow. You think of the marks in the gully, the handprints in the cave, the faces you've met and lost. How some stayed strangers and others blurred into kin, and how one by one they've all become stories. The fire beside you pops softly. A coal rolls away from the centre, hissing in the cold air before going dark. You reach forward, nudge it back into the circle. It flares for a moment, bright enough to paint your hand in gold, then settles into a slow, patient glow. It feels almost alive. Not a pet, not a servant, but an old companion that has followed you longer than you can remember. You glance up and imagine another fire far away across a ridge or a river burning at this same moment. Someone else is staring into it, seeing their own shapes in the embers. Maybe they're telling a story about people like you. Maybe they're telling it wrong. Or maybe they're telling it in a way that will make someone years from now walk a path toward a ridge they've never seen. That's the thing about these stories, they're not yours once they leave your mouth. They find other fires, other ears, and they change shape, and in changing they survive. The camp begins to settle. One by one, voices fade into sleep. The wind shifts, carrying scents of pine smoke animal, hide the faint sweetness of dried berries stored for morning. You pull your blanket closer, not because you're cold, but because the night feels like it's leaning in to listen. Somewhere out in that night are all the things you didn't see, faces you never met, marks you never found, choices you never had to make. And if the stories are true, some of them are watching still, just beyond the firelight, waiting for the moment you look away. You think of the cave again, the way the shapes seemed to move when you stared too long, the way the handprint with 6 fingers felt colder than the rest, and you wonder if there's someone right now walking into that same darkness for the first time. If they'll feel you there, your breath, your shadow layered in with all the others who came before. It's not a bad thought. To be part of the walls, to be part of the ridge, the river, the trail, not as a ghost to frighten, but as a presence to remind you are not the first and you will not be the last. The fire dips low again. You lean forward, stir it with a stick, and sparks leap upward, tiny red fragments disappearing into the dark. They remind you of travellers you've seen from a distance there, one moment gone the next, leaving only the faintest trace behind. If you listen closely, the crackle of the fire becomes something else. A voice not in words, but in rhythm. It says this is not the end. The ridge is still there. The cave is still waiting. And if you close your eyes, you can almost feel the warmth of another fire entirely, when you haven't yet sat beside one whose smoke smells different, whose stories you've never heard. When morning comes, you'll wake to the sound of someone stoking the embers. The air will be sharp, the ground frozen underfoot, the ridge outlined in pale light. There will be choices to make, whether to walk the same paths or to turn toward the ones you've avoided. You'll tell yourself there's time to decide, but deep down you'll know the decision has already been made. Because the stories never really stop at the last word. They circle back, take your hand, and lead you somewhere you've never been. Somewhere almost familiar. Somewhere that feels like the edge of your own memory, even if you've never stood there before. So tonight, let the fire burn low. Let the dark press close. And remember that out there across some unseen ridge, another fire is burning, another story is being told. One day you'll walk toward it, and when you do, you'll understand that the person at that fire has been waiting for you all along. Until then, sleep. Dream of the marks you'll leave, and when you wake, look for the first trail that feels like it's watching you. Follow it. The embers will still be warm when you arrive. Sleep comes, but it's not the kind that closes a door behind you. It's the kind where the door stays open just a crack, and through it shapes move. You're not in camp anymore. The fire is gone. Only a thin line of light runs along the ground, leading somewhere you can't see. You follow it. The air is colder here, thinner, carrying a smell you can place like rain before it falls. Your footsteps make no sound. And ahead the ridge rises again, but it's not the same one you've crossed before. This one is lower, broken in places, as if something once pushed through from the other side. At the crest you stop. Below is a valley you've never seen, its floor scattered with strange shapes. Not huts, not trees, but tall spines of stone leaning at impossible angles. Some are etched with marks, but they're too far to read. The wind carries faint voices, not words, just the rise and fall of a rhythm older than speech. You realize you've heard this sound before. In the cave, in the gully, in the crackle of your own fire, something moves between the stone spines. Slow, deliberate. It turns toward you, though you can't see its face. You know it's been here a long time, waiting for someone to step down into the valley. The light along the ground fades, but you can still see the path if you keep your eyes on it. Your hand tightens on the spear you didn't remember picking up, and then the figure raises an arm not in warning, but in invitation. When you wake, the fire in camp has burned down to ash. The ridge is quiet, but in the grey of morning your feet already itch for the trail. The next story is waiting. It always has been.